Today I'm going to just be going over my JCM 800. This is a 4104, 1983. It was stock when I bought it used. I think I paid $750 for it used, and I think it even had stock tubes in it when I got it. And the reason I'm doing the little video here is because I had it modded, but not like, I guess not like most people have these hot rodded. I didn't have it hot rodded at all. What I did was I did two reversible mods, and I didn't do them, my amp tech did them. And they were inexpensive and reversible. And everyone says that these amps sound great, the clean channel, and they also sound great, the dirty channel, and that's absolutely true. But what I wanted was, I wanted to be able to play this amp and have two things done. Channel switching. And I wanted to be able to get the clean channel when I wanted with just a regular foot switch, an on-off simple foot switch. And I wanted a separate volume. So what my amp guy said was, I can easily do that, and there's one input here for the guitar goes in, and then he took out the low input and put a volume knob. So this knob is completely for the clean channel. And then I told him, I said, I love the way the amp sounds. I do not, my only concern is I don't want it to change the tone or anything, the attack of the drive channel or the high input channel, because it just sounds incredible. He said, no problems. I said, so don't touch anything in the drive channel, which he didn't. And when you they go to the drive channel, when you switch the foot switch, which just plugs in with a simple, guitar cable, any on-off foot switch changes the channel. It completely bypasses this mod and goes right to regular amp mode. So they do share the exact same tone controls. That can be that can be hell for some people. For me, I don't give a shit. It sounds fine. The clean channel is definitely much louder now. So the volume on the I never get the volume in the master. Like tonight, I'm going to play my regular Thursday night gig. I will not get the master up past 3, maybe 3.5. I still mic, but even the amp really is it's a 50 watt, 6550 tubes. It's still very loud. The volume for the clean channel will probably get to 2. So, and there's just my regular settings that I always have with the with this amp. And the other mod that I had done with this amp, I'll take it around the back. Since I like to use the timeline, and I have a chorus, and I have these three effects right here, the timeline, the chorus, and the equalizer are in the effects loop of the amp. So all these effects go in the front of the amp for a little bit of compression, the flanger, which I use for maybe 1 or 2 songs for out of the 60 we're going to play tonight, and then I've got the sex drive, the BB preamp, and then the Wampler, which takes it into like Green Day kind of distortion. The other thing I had was an effects loop installed. So here in the back, he just installed a simple effects loop, and it's incredible. So yeah, I mean, so the people who say that they can't mod these amps, and of course the mods are reversible, but it just makes it a totally, usable modern amp, so that you can put your, because I want to use the amp's distortion for the bulk of my sound is going to be me riding the volume knob, but using the amp's overdrive, and going back and forth from the clean channel to the dirty channel. But I also want to be able to use time-based effects, which I think sound best in in an effects loop. So that buffered effects loop that he put in there, it's incredible. Everything works fantastic in it. There's no, it just sounds exactly like an amp should. Because if you run this amp with the digital delay out in front, it's just a little bit of a mushier sound. There's nothing wrong with that. I know Jimmy Page did that with a Echoplex, But I think the timeline sounds much better when it's in back of the overdrives as opposed to smashing the front of the amp. Anyway, whether it does or doesn't is irrelevant. That's the sound that I'm used to hearing. I know a lot of people run Vox amps, the Edge, and everything. They crank up their amp and they throw, a deluxe Memory Man in front of it. The sound that I like is with the delay behind the drive. So the effects loop does that. And chorus sounds great out in front, but again, for me, it's more of a subtle effect. It's just slightly less, you still feel it, but to put it in the effects loop sounds great. The flanger in the effects loop sounded like it was too much. The chorus out in front sounded like it was too much. So it's all trial and error and what you like. There's no right and no wrong. And the equalizer is only there as a slight boost for any leads. That's all I use it for. It's just a tiny little bass boost. I mean, I haven't touched it since the last show, so it probably is still too loud because it gets knocked around in the bag and all that stuff. But I just use it not even for a mid boost, none of that. Just a tiny little boost of the overall volume. I don't really EQ any of it because I just love the way the amp sounds by itself. So I think my tech did a great job. I'll give you his name. I don't remember his name, but I'll put it in the description. He's in Orange County, California. He's fabulous. I think both of these mods, one of them was $400 and the other one was $150 or something. I don't know. I think it came to about $500 to do both of the mods. But I also had him change tubes and rebias the amp, and I think he threw that all in with it. So don't quote me on that. I don't remember. It was about it was earlier in spring when I had all this done, and he retubed the entire amp. The one thing that I will note about the JCM 800, a lot of people say that Marshalls are hit and miss. And what I found, I've had a few Marshalls. I never had a combo before this, but I've had JCM 800 heads before, the single channel heads, and the difference is really noticeable with the V1 or number one preamp tube, and we noticed it with this amp when he took out the preamp tubes and changed them, and I got the amp back and I said, this sounds like a dog. It sounds like a typical dog Marshall. And we realized after some trial and error, he didn't throw out the original tubes, and it was just an electro-harmonics tube. But that tube was rating higher than all the other tubes we had tried, and I actually had a couple of NOS RCAs, and I think I had a Telefunken. But for some reason, this amp likes a little bit of a hot tube in V1, and it's a huge difference. It's not just the difference between turn up the treble and re-EQ it. No, it's like a major difference. And I think that a lot of times, going back and thinking about all the Marshalls that I've played, I wonder, because I was not that much into tubes back then. It was more, it was younger, broke, and just rocking out, and I could give a shit. And also there was no YouTube. We didn't have all this useless information at our fingertips. But thinking back on the several Marshalls that I had, I wonder if that V1 tube is the thing that makes the difference between having a Marshall that's a dog and having a Marshall that just completely screams. Because there was a huge difference, as I said, from about 4 or 5 different tubes. And the tube that I've got in V1 right now is nothing special. It's an over-the-counter Electro-Harmonix 12AX7A. It just rates higher. And I know that you can buy tubes that are rated gainier. I don't know if that's the right term, but you can go to Doug's Tubes or wherever online and say, I want a hot tube, and they find tubes that are rated a little bit hotter. And I definitely recommend trying that if you have a JCM 800 and you've tried everything else before you go and mod it to be if you want to get it to sound like a death metal amp, you're going to have to mod the fucking amp. But if you just want it to sound like a really kick-ass, what it's supposed to sound like Slash or whatever the Marshall sound is in your head, try getting a hot V1 12AX7 for $12. And I know a few of the online tube vendors do sell them that way. You just have to ask for it. And I think it might be a $2 add-on. And I can tell you that it made a world of difference. And when we looked at the tubes on the scope, the V1 tube, we put it right back in, and there it was. I'm like, yep, that's it. That's it. I'm keeping that tube. He said, yep, there it is on the scope. You can see it. It rates hotter than the other tubes that we tried. I said, okay, problem solved. So now we know, V1, get a hot tube. Anyway, enough of me yakking for 10 minutes. Now I'll just play it for you and show you how the mods sound and how the channel switch sounds. So that's just the regular, high channel. There's no effects going on right now. So now there's a little dip between when you switch channels. It's I guess he's some kind of photo resistor that he put in there so there'd be no pop. It actually smooths out. We're at a pretty low volume right now. I think I'm like at 1. As you turn the amp up to a live situation, it definitely smooths out.